Spawned in the darkest pits of the universe, the piratical Eldar are a curse upon all races of the galaxy. For untold thousands of years they have preyed upon us, stealing forth from the shadows and dark places on their raids of terror and violence, massacring or capturing all whose paths they cross. That they are utterly evil and inhuman is without question. The fall of a civilization is a deep wound, yet the fall of an entire species is a trauma of unfathomable despair. Its myriad branches of government, ethics, and glories shattered like ill-tempered glass. From the zenith of galactic power to the dregs of existence, the Eldari Empire has suffered the greatest calamity imaginable. Lesser species gorging on our sundered glories, growing fat upon their unearned spoils. Yet among the foil of the children of the stars, many have taken drastic measures to ensure their own survival, and forfeit all measure of decency in order to stave off the hunger of she who thirsts. For today, we shall elucidate the forsaken Dark Ones, the malicious detritus of a once noble species who forsake the dignity of what remains of the Eldar species to ensure their continual degradation. The shadow of the diaspora, the Drukhari. With the birth scream of Slaanesh hearkening an era of devastation to come, those trillions who had contributed to its spawning were consumed to sate its ravenous hunger. The Eldar species largely destroyed with the violent birth of this god of excess. Those within the bounds of the webway watched in horror at the creation that they had wrought as the largest star-spanning empire of its time fell to ruin. Unrepentant for their crimes against creation, not content with seeking penance, these selfish souls began to eke out an existence, preying on the innocent to stave off the embrace of the chaotic entity to which they had sired. Adapting from their position as custodians of an interstellar civilization to depraved slavers, the great calamity forced such Eldar to cut ties with their connection to the warp in order to slow their pull into the maw of Slaanesh. The Terran reality known as the Eye of Terror, a monument to the Eldari's hubris. It is the greatest of ironies that the so-called lesser species to which the Eldar cast their gaze would serve as the last hope for a peaceful galaxy. The great wheel turning inexorably, with or without the intervention of the Eldari. While some renounced comfort to live as exodites upon far-flung maiden worlds, others took to the stars upon great craft worlds, seeking to rebuild their former glories. Yet the so-called Dark Kin, or Eladrith Aeneas, could not forgo the vices which had reaped calamity, and thus remained within reach of their inevitable destroyer, their addiction to blissful suffering too great to relinquish. Content only to seek self-gratification while sidestepping its cost, this indignant offshoot of the Eldari descended from the pleasure cults, which predated their fall from grace, stubbornly refused to accept their crestfallen fate. Nestled within the bosom of the webway, the Dark Eldar began to rebuild. The death of the Eldar pantheon of gods, save for the laughing one, Kegarak, forcing these wayward souls to begin anew on their own terms. Using their dominion of the webway's labyrinthine dimensions to their advantage, those that had survived the great calamity were hunted for sport, as the Drukhari preyed upon their kin to sate the thirst of the Dark Prince. The ravages of Sar Lanfresh sparing the greatest of the webway's port cities, Kormora. This vast hub of the Sundered Empire's fleet proved the perfect den for this new breed of hedonistic psychopaths. Connected to the farthest reaches of real space, allowing the Drukhari to raid the domains of fledgling species at will, the single largest outpost within the webway drew bedfellows to its embrace, as the Dark Eldar found common cause. Hidden from those who lacked mastery of the Immaterium to navigate even the simplest of the webway's winding paths, this dark city expanded until its power base caused its borders to subsume its smaller contemporaries. Each private estate, subrealm, and outpost grafted to its edifice alike to a barb-edged space hulk, the plunder which fed the gluttonous citizens of Kormora saw to the construction of dagger-like spires which loomed over its lower wards. Another desecration of the stars, reminding all of the fell legacies of the pleasure cults. This infernal city of death, suffering, and misery, burgeoned with dead men walking, as those destined to be sacrificed extended the lives of doomed aristocrats. Feeding from the vitality of those dragged to its gloomy heart, The Drukhari of the Dark City restore beauty, fortitude, and pristine auras only temporarily, as Slaanesh greedily saps the strength from all who live within Comora's domains. The streets of its underbelly filled with the dregs stripped of their souls in a state of undeath. These so-called parched are little more than husks of their former selves, beneath the notice of even the most insignificant thralls. For such is the fate of the Dark City, that it shall never escape the draining aura of She Who Thirsts, and the ambrosia required to satiate such a malevolent entity is everlasting. Satisfying the appetite of She Who Thirsts for 10 millennia of cruelty, the pawns of the Dark City do not take kindly to trespassers within their domains. Each street and minor landmass ruled by cabals descended from noble houses of the Dark Eldar's past, predators lurk within every shadow, hungry for a chance to gorge on the suffering of innocents or sinners alike. The many vassal domains and subrealms of the Webway incorporated into Comora by force over the long millennia. Screams aplenty resound from the untold flesh pits, filled with those captured by their cruel masters. The tyrant of Comora, Supreme Overlord Azrael Vect, watching over his domains with Machiavellian glee. For over 6 millennia, this despot has ruled the Dark City despite numerous attempts at coups and assassinations. Using an attempted invasion of High Comora by 500 Space Marines of the Salamander's chapter to his advantage, Vect seized power during the losses incurred by bolters of the Astartes, enshrining himself as the Dark City's true ruler. Purging the noble Eldari houses, which had stood as its custodians since the fall of their once great empire, the one slave of the Dark City rose to prominence as the apex schemer of this proverbial pit of snakes. Vect's seizing of power, with a tenfold increase to the Drukhari's raids of worlds within close proximity, their capture of every Imperial Navy warship which threatened to invade the Desiderian portal within the system of the same name, incurring spoils aplenty. The detractors of the Supreme Overlord, humbled for their misgivings, Vect demanded a new meritocracy over the rule of noble houses, wherein leadership would be decided by the strength of one's cabal, rather than inheritance. As the Age of Dark Genesis gave way to the rise of Vect, other eras such as the Age of Pain and Plenty heralded new challenges for the Dark City. Its teetering on the precipice of disaster, nudged with the events known as disjunctions. Warp cataclysms wrought by upsetting the balance of immaterial energies tethered to the Dark City's foundations. Such upsets caused the fabrics of the warp to damage the domains of the Webway, allowing demonic entities to spill forth. The Dark City's wards, protecting it from the most potent influence of Slaanesh, straining in times of such unease. Vect has time and again used such crises to his advantage, furthering his stranglehold on power. Such threats to Comora heightened with the birth of the Great Rift, thanks to the efforts of Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade. The bisecting of the galaxy in twain by the ruinous powers has further imperiled the safeguards of the Dark City. The last great disjunction conjured during the Night of Revelations. Within the crucible of the Queen of Knives, Lelith Hesperax, the grand succubus of the Cult of Strife, ended the life of the Daughter of Shades, Amharok, the sacrifice made to the Eldar god of the dead, Inayad, reviving the fallen soul now known as Ivrain. Such powerful conflagrations of arcana caused Comora to endure the most powerful disjunction it had ever seen. Truly threatening the dominance of Azrael's influence, as demons beset his domains, Vect ordered sections of the Dark City to be quarantined, forfeiting uncountable lives to the pawns of chaos. Comora's subrealms to this day beset by demons, those pledged to Vect now attempt to hunt down the Daughter of Shades as reprisal for the damage done, as even her killer, Lelith Hesperax, now serves as her lieutenant. The Drukhari way of life, if it could be called such a thing, threatened by the awakening of Inayad, many Dark Eldar have chosen to side with the Inari, due to Ivrain's promises that her patron shall vanguard their souls from the clutches of Slaanesh. A chance of redemption for those thought fallen too far into damnation, a dreadful prospect for the Supreme Overlord, who feeds upon his subjects' desperation and submission. Showing nothing but contempt for their Exodite, Craftworld, and Inari kin, the Drukhari see themselves as the true inheritors of the Eldari Empire, having never retreated from the clutches of She Who Thirsts. Seen by their rivals as those fallen to the path of damnation, the pale and live killers of the Dark Eldar prize martial skill and cunning as an alternative to mastery of the arcane arts. Every soul nurturing their predatory instinct To compensate for their atrophied psychic abilities, none are permitted to channel war powers within the Dark City due to the inherent threat of chaos which it invites. Every edge of their panoplies adorned with razor-sharp blades in order to inflict pain given any and all opportunity. Every warrior of the Drukhari Cabals revels in their pursuit of the kill and thrill of the final, decisive killing stroke. Each Archon embarking upon raids with only the most accomplished members of their Cabal. Failure is not an option during these devastating offensives, and as such, all rivalries are set aside until tallies of spoils have been counted and courses charted to the safety of Commorragh. Trading captured souls alike to livestock once returned to the Dark City. Whether rendered into flesh troughs, forced as free labor for weaponsmiths, or tormented for the delight of their buyers, there is arguably no worse place for a mortal to find themselves than within this pit of sadists. Staving off the First, induced by Slaanesh, which threatens to claim their souls, every Drukhari adds to the endless cycle of torment, anguish and pain as a preferable alternative to becoming a morsel of She Who Firsts. Believing the Eldari gods of yore to be long dead, the Drukhari give worship only to Kayla Mensha Kane, the god of war, and its lesser powers known as the Dark Muses. Embodiments of the selfish vices, emblematic of the pleasure cults to which the Drukhari emulate. These icons of Dark Eldar folklore are grim reflections of what the Imperium might regard as the living saints. Each muse an avatar to a specific vice, while Shemesh, brother of Same-Hand's cosmic serpent, is known as the Lord of Poisons. Lilitu, the consort of the Void, is the patron of the courtesan elite. Supreme Overlord Azdrabael Vect, proclaiming himself as the living muse, with his resurrection from death. Many believe his demigod-like stature as vindication enough for enacting the Dark Eldar civil war. The most senior positions of Drukhari society, with exception to Vect, being the Archons. These leaders of the Cabals approximate what could be described as a ruling class of the Dark City. Permitted to ravage verdant worlds, claiming entire populations of serfs, assault Imperial crusades, or in rarer occasions, collapse portions of the webway to defend Commorragh. These masters of war are appointed by virtue of their successful campaigns. The oldest of the Archons regarded by their underlings as the Lords of Twilight. From within the taller spires of their imposing domains, these ancient overlords have proven cunning in the extreme to not only survive the fall of the Eldar Empire, but also the schemes of Azdrabael Vect. Unable to hide the ravages of time from their visage, all such Archons wear black-veined masks to hide their faces. Their visage, when combined with weapons such as soul traps, agonizers and shadow fields, striking fear into the hearts of their enemies and allies alike. Beings known as Medusae, shackled to the will of their Archons. These living archives of roiling emotion and memories, parasitically tethered to humanoid thralls, bearing similarity to a cluster of brain matter and spinal cords. Captured from within the warp, these jellyfish-like psychic plankton feed on the daydreams and nightmares of the living, and as such, store valuable sensations for their masters to consume from their so-called brain fruits. Blind creatures known as Urgals, created within the damned subrel of Shaddam, used as trackers for their master's prey. Those not needed to be taken alive are mauled to death by these peculiar troglodytes. Lamians, used by their Archons as courtesans due to their mastery of passion and imaginative stimulation. The only talent which exceeds the cult of Lamia's carnal expertise is their mastery of concocting poisons. Each Archon guarded by an assortment of Slith, these aliens are a more reliable alternative than Drukhari bodyguards, due to their comparative lack of self-interest. A fallen species, enticed by the charms of Slaanesh, these multi-limbed serpentine creatures bear striking similarity to the Lair Xenos, fought by the Imperium of Man during their ill-fated Great Crusade. Advised by the succubi archives of allied witch cults on strategies of warfare during raids of ripe planets, while the Brides of Death aid in Archon's military matters, their homunculi shall tend to their wounds and if needs be revive them from death. Unconcerned with the games of politics that the Archons wage, these wizened ancients remain loyal in exchange for peculiar trinkets, which only the concerted armies of an Archon can provide. Though the Drukhari deny themselves the power of the Immaterium, it would be foolish to believe them limited in their methods of waging war. Their myriad organizations specializing in both barbaric and graceful arts of battle. Most stoic of such warriors are the Incubi, an order of soldiers similar to aspect warriors of the Craftworld Eldar in their appearance and combat training regimes. Honing their martial skill as their singular purpose in life, these grim souls enshrine honor as among their few remaining virtues, as they seek perfection in wielding their devastating claves. Obsessed with killing their enemies in abundance, particularly if they are worthy foes, their trophy racks which protrude from their shoulders are a fitting terror tactic when combined with their menacing spiked helmets and somber aura. Making little to no sound when attacking, as they strike with exceptional agility and brutish grace, these incredibly disciplined warriors act as both bodyguards of Archons and shock troopers alike. Their shrines, given in praise to the fallen first Phoenix Lord of the Striking Scorpions, Ara. Each hierarch of the Incubus Order presides over a hidden shrine within the Dark City, alike to an exarch of the Craftworld discipline. The armor of each Incubus claimed from its former bearer, they shall be accepted as a true warrior upon killing an aspect warrior of the Craftworlds in single combat, shattering their spirit stone to send their soul screaming to the embrace of Slaanesh. Such mercenaries of Khaine, pledging their fealty to warlords capable of providing adequate war zones to sate their need for battle. Efficiency is their prime objective when enacting violence, as wasted motion is time not spent killing another foe. Prizing their claves as the perfect weapons for a warrior to wield, these hook-tipped power swords belie exceptional craftsmanship, with war leaders of the Incubi adopting the title Clavex as a testament to their weapon's prestige. Projecting neural energies from their tormentors mounted upon their chestplates, such neural pulses harry their victim's nervous system, with some using broken spirit stones of slain exarchs to craft bloodstones, which are capable of killing their enemies outright. Racks, acting as the twisted frontline berserkers of the Drukhari lines, these victims of the Homunculi Coven scalpels, once known as Haemakalites, harness their torment through acts of violence. Masked with iron to instill fear into their foes, whilst hiding their hideous visage from their allies, these voluntary avatars of suffering defend their fleshcrafters with no thought for their own safety, preferring to inflict damage in melee combat range, using toxin-tipped venom blades. These monstrosities also utilize meat hooks and stun rods to incapacitate their prey for use by their fell patrons. Metal gauntlets grafted to replace their hands fitted with injectable serums. With a flex of their tendons, the concoctions of the homunculi can be injected into a rack's opponent, whether as a means to subdue or inflict horrific pain. Never leaving the side of their master, whether on raids or within the domains of the Dark City, depending on the preference of their masters, some racks possess multiple extra limbs, spinal grafts, or bone protrusions added to their constitution. Grotesques, another infamous fleshcraft of the Homunculi Covens. Unlike their rack kin, these subjects of the sciences of the Dark Eldar do not willingly volunteer to endure their transformation. Their surgeries are punishment for slights made against their masters. The chemical hormones and macrosteroids induced into their bodies, combined with surgical modifications, can take several years to reach its intended metamorphosis. Agonizingly convulsing, as growths of bone erupt from their spines and muscles stretch their skin. As their growth subsides, talons are attached to their wrists and tubing fitted to their veins to better inject their toxin-rich ichor. Lobotomized in order to prevent disobedience, these thralls of the homunculi grasp only fragments of their circumstance as they mindlessly follow the orders of their malevolent masters. Shuffling after their overlords like beaten dogs at a moment's notice, their kill senses activated to unleash their true potential against their homunculi's enemies. Syringes aplenty, pumping stimulants directly into their spinal columns. Wheezes of pain can be heard behind their iron masks as tubes force their hearts to pump the dense sludge which courses through their veins. Rending their foes limb from limb using great hooks, cleavers and claws. Only with leave of their masters is their killing frenzy suddenly ended, and often causes their rampage to be put down by allies should their master temporarily shuffle from their mortal coil. Witches, comprising the bulk of the covens to which they pledge fealty, under the command of their respective hecatrix of their squad. Each in turn reports to their Siren leader for new commands. The Siren's elite Hecatari blood brides wielding the most peculiar weapons available to their kindred. Though all witches are skilled with the art of knife fighting, some use razor flails, hydra gauntlets, or splinter pistols to best hunt their prey. Reporting directly to their coven succubus, each assembles elite cadres of handmaidens into murderesses to fight under their command. Each vying for the favor of their succubus as they charge into battle anointed with the blood of their enemies. Promotion to higher ranks is often achieved by assassinating their superior holding the title to which they vie for. Beast masters of the witch cults, overseeing the rabid alien predators broken to their will. These pheromone-soaked shamans bring their pets to heel with only a simple glare. Surveying the battle atop skyboards as their pawns attack on the ground, the crack of their whips instills bloodlust within their hordes, whether hell spiders, Barghesi, Donorian-clawed fiends, or even broken Adeptus Astartes. Kabalite Trueborn, rare in the extreme, these Drukhari born not of a needle, but more traditional methods, often do not survive the Dark City due to the long gestation period within their mother's womb. Those that survive the perils of the Dark City beyond child-rearing are rewarded as among the most privileged souls, their arrogant preening above their lesser half-born, causing them to only fight besides likewise naturally born kinsmen. The elite of their Archon's cabal, sporting among the most advanced weapons available to bear, whether armed with splinter pistols, splinter cannons, dark lances, or shredders. What these souls lack in martial discipline is compensated by sheer firepower. Led by their Drakon, hardened by battles waged in the name of their cabal, while many would claim their duty is to preserve their master, in truth, the utmost objective of a Trueborn is to claim glory through acts of devastation. Mandrakes, by far the most enigmatic warriors of the Drukhari, these denizens of the darkest domains of the Webway are feared by all within the Dark City. Their unnatural ability to traverse spacetime from the shadows, forewarned by hisses and the nattering of sharp teeth. Their ebon skin etched with runes which seem to shift with otherworldly light. None know the true origin of these living shades, though many claim them to be the spawn of Eldar and demons conceived during the fall of the Eldari Empire. Others citing the Mandrakes to be the descendants of the pleasure cults, driven mad by the perils of nightmare dimensions. These creepers encompass the lack of life given form, as freezing temperatures hearken their arrival. Channeling life energies from those they prey upon, Mandrakes cast blue-white bale blasts from their hands, which can flash freeze their enemies in place, allowing for a swift death by their sickle-shaped blades. Masters of stealth who nourish themselves on the fears of their prey. Their services are given in exchange for tithes of captured souls, though on rare occasions, senior Mandrakes known as Night Fiends demand esoteric gifts such as a true name, the heart of an Adeptus Arbites judge, or the voice of a subjugated rival. Their clothing, sewn from the flayed skin of those who betray their oaths. Not even Asdrubal Vecht would be foolish enough to double-cross these revenants of gloom. Scourges, the primary patrols of the defenders of High Comera, these genetically and surgically altered avians, swoop from on high upon trespassers of their master's realm. Impaling their prey upon spikes of the many spires of the Dark City, these untiring abominations of fleshcraft also gather information, exchanging messages and gleaning gossip from the streets below. Intercepting communications of rival houses before delivering them to their respective Archons. To target a scourge within the Dark City is a crime punishable by death due to their crucial role as messengers. The most prestigious such scourges, known as Solarites, their form-fitting ghost plate armor protects their fragile physiques from small arms fire as they fire volleys from above using shard carbines. Kabalite warriors, the most commonplace warriors of any cabal, these proven soldiers of High Comera are born only to kill and be killed, seizing glories when they present themselves. Each squad led by a Sybarite to best hone their kill frenzy. These veteran raiders induct new members into the fold and are obeyed merely due to their experience, aiding their juniors' chances at survival. Drukhari armored vehicles capable of flight or gravitic suspension, unlike the primitive creations of the Monkey. The streets of Low Comera buzz with Hellion gangs, not yet accomplished enough to join the ranks of the Kabalite warriors, or outcast from their domains. Gathering in swarms to prevent their single-pilot skyboards being picked off piecemeal. To be a Hellion is to wage endless turf wars between rival gangs, as citizens of High Comera delight at the rabble below, squabbling for scraps. Raiders, the most common transport used by the Drukhari, whether on a war footing or transporting bodies through the Dark City, these lightweight craft are a staple of the Dark Eldar. Extremely maneuverable and capable of mounting dark lances on their prow, as well as sickle blades, electroshock rams and splinter rifles to allow for swift precision strikes. Capable of housing 10 standard Dark Eldar warriors, raiders deploy squads into the heart of battle, whether they be of the witch cults, homunculi covens, or cabals at breakneck speed. Venoms, the most agile transports available to the Drukhari. These arrow-headed skimmers insert elite battlegroups into the heart of war in waves as a means to overwhelm their target positions, armed with twin-link splinter rifles and cannons to cover their advance, typically targeting the largest ships to produce the greatest yield of casualties. Many a foe ignores the five-man venoms due to their smaller stature, and thus the Drukhari delight in using such methodologies to insert their most prized warriors harmlessly into the thick of fighting. Reavers, the equivalent of jet bikes within the fold of the Drukhari. These single-pilot skycraft are a symbiosis of lethality and speed. The reflexes required to pilot such a vehicle, beyond the scope of species such as the Mon-Kai. Seen within the Toroid racing arena of the Dark City when not at war, crowds aplenty revel in the daring maneuvers of expert raider pilots, as their death races delight the masses with shows of high-octane thrills. Razorwing jet fighters acting as heavy support transports for the most grueling of engagements. Such vehicles advance ahead of the main assault, targeting gun batteries and enemy armor. Piloted by veteran Reaver jet bikers, grown bored of their times within the racing arenas, the thrill of battle cannot be compared. The thrill of battle cannot be compared to, as they seek to inflict damage without incurring any wounds in return. Most widespread of all machines of war are that of the Talos pain engines, outfitted with chilling assortments of weapons, surgical devices, and fusions of organic materials to machine components. Another testament to the cruelty of the homunculi covens, these hulking torture devices move with speed, using their gravitic motors, before tearing its foes apart with razor-sharp claws. Its scorpion-like sting appendage fueled by the torments of those writhing within its clutches. These mobile torture chambers punish all within their wake, much to the delight of their sickening masters. The Kronos parasite engines, created to drain the life essence from their prey. These monstrosities of alchemy imbibe themselves on the youth of their victims, as their physical form withers within single heartbeats, leaving only cadavers. The pulses of pilfered vitality, released to bolster allies within its proximity. Drukhari within its presence are imbued with renewed strength, with many an Archon paying the homunculi covens handsomely for one such Kronos to be sold to their care. Ravagers, the most similar to the more mundane tanks of lesser species. These lightly armored vehicles ambush foes with overwhelming firepower before withdrawing beyond return fire. Sowing panic within enemy lines as they scramble to counter such sudden attacks, its use as a terror weapon is as effective as the more conventional effects of its armaments. Last of the armored vehicles is the Void Raven Bomber, a heavy ordnance weapons platform piloted by only the most prestigious death racers of High Comorra, utilizing sonic dampeners and stealth warfare suites to confound enemy scanning technologies. The payloads of these aircraft unleash devastation, leaving no trace for reprisal from its enemies. The war machine of the Drukhari, always in motion. If comparing its Archons as the motive catalyst, then their Cabals are the gears which drive such a mechanism. Each an army in its own right, these assortments of cutthroats, killers and beasts, march to war only to sate their desires and further their master's ambition. The Cabal of the Black Heart, by far the oldest and most sizable of all Cabals. These scions of Azrael Vect have installed several Archons within its fold, who each in turn vie for supremacy. Fanatically devoted to their supreme overlord, such is the reputation of Azrael Vect that none dare attempt to overthrow his rule, knowing full well the consequences meted out to all who have prior attempted to end his reign. Thousands of Capellite warriors, mercenaries, and allies of the witch cult of strife, forming an unassailable alliance. The intricate legions of spies, informants, and agents of Vect guide his men's efforts as the iron fist of the Tyrant of Comorra crushes any who stand in his way. The Cabal of the Flayed Skull, second only to the Black Heart in military might. These crimson-clad aerial combatants follow the commands of their Archon, Vraesk Maladrak. Their favored use of razor-winged jet fighters and Void Raven bombers, having brought worlds to heel without a single Capellite warrior setting foot upon its soil. Other notable houses, such as the Cabal of the Baleful Gaze, fight alongside the cult of the Wrath Unbound when raiding Imperial outposts. Their targeting of infrastructure facilitated by swarms of Chimerae and clawed fiends unleashed by their Beastmasters. The Cabal of the Bleak Soul Brethren, delighting in their slaughter. Their jokes of dark humor spill from behind their shark-toothed smiles as they indulge in their vices. The Cabal of the Bladed Lotus, among the oldest organizations of the Dark City, who practiced their grim arts prior to the fall. Their raid of the Gorgon's Forge of the Iron Hand's homeworld, Medusa, won many glories for this ancient creed. Split into pro- and anti-Inari factions with the dawn of the 42nd millennium, the defection of their strongest allies, the cult of the Jade Labyrinth, sought to the loss of the Port of Widows, crippling their economy of slave labor. The Cabal of the Bloodied Claw, led by their ruler of the Void, Akrara Kef, this survivor of over 300 assassination attempts, is remarkable for his proclivity to always stand one step ahead of his foes, without ever leaving the seclusion of his throne room. Harboring retinues of incubi and mandrakes aplenty to dispatch his enemies, the ever-growing tally of failed rivals of this ancient Archon are a testament to his guile. The Cabal of the Broken Sigil, led by Archon Zeraphis, his utterly predictable tactics involving the use of hallucinogenic gases, seizure of communication channels, and rampant carpet bombings prior to invasions, regardless heightening the fear to which his Cabal gorges. Targeted by impunity by kill teams of the Chamber Militant of the Ordo Xenos, the best efforts of the Death Watch have done little to diminish the acts of terror committed by the Broken Sigil. The Cabal of the Dying Sun, among the oldest of Drukhari houses, these prideful raiders attack at sunset, with their Archon, Vol Zalanth, leading the charge. Obsessed with the transitional state of light surrendering to darkness, this theatrical Cabal utilizes forbidden arcane arts tracing back to the Eldari Empire of yore, to engulf their enemies in smothering night. Their fortress of the Pinnacle of Disdain are like to a gargantuan mountain of shrapnel. Within the deepest vaults of their sanctuary, artifacts capable of killing stars by psychically siphoning the life force from their cores are protected by the most accomplished warriors of their creed. The Cabal of the Falling Moon, the foremost rival of the Cabal of the Dying Sun, this lunar cult seeks any and all opportunities to undermine their incandescent nemesis, intercepting targets which the Cabal of the Dying Light seeks to claim within the Ulia system. The Cabal of the Falling Moon sought to destroy every planet and satellite within the system's domains before its solar body was snuffed out by the pawns of the Dying Sun. The Cabal of the Fiend Ascendant employing vast witch cults to aid in its campaigns. Alongside Medusae and Harlequin allies, this Cabal harries the eastern fringe of space, fighting both the Imperium of Man and Tau Empire. The Cabal of the Last Hatred, expending all efforts to bridge the chasm between life and death. Some speculate these Drukhari to be attempting to achieve immortality, or bring about the end of the Eldari race, with exception to themselves. Hunting both Craftworlders and Exodites alike in their persecutions, their forbidden arts allow the permanent soul binding of their victims to cadavers, which shall become a part of their grand carnival of undead corpses. The Lords of the Iron Fawn, holding dominion of the Pandemon subrealm of the Webway. These aristocrats tracing their lineage to a bygone era are the most revered of all weapon crafters, and favour overwhelming shows of firepower in battle. Having failed in their attempts to usurp Azdrabale Vect from power, under orders of their leader, Archon Q. As penance, the Lords of the Iron Fawn supply the Cabal of the Black Heart with tithes of the most advanced weaponry. The Cabal of the Obsidian Rose, though not as revered for their craft as the Lords of the Iron Fawn, nonetheless possess the most weapon shops within Komora, their vast array of armaments supplying less prestigious houses. Their Archon, Aestra Chromis, a master artificer in her own right, her restoration of the Cabal's weaponsmithing pedigree would be secured with her usurpation of her predecessor, Archon Valoriac, aided by his retinue's weapons jamming as a direct result of his laxity. Punishing those of her Cabal who produce flawed creations, her personal pain engine, the Overseer, uses the screams of its victims to focus those who toil at their workbenches. The Cabal of the Onyx Scar, operating within the screaming vortex of the Calixis sector. These Drukhari, not pledged to the defense of the Dark City, retain a foothold on the world of Sackgrave, a planet connected by several useful webway tunnels for the Cabal's endeavors. The Onyx Scar also seek to locate the Ivory Chalice hidden somewhere upon Sackgrave, said to contain the ashes of the slain Dark Muse, Inesh. The Cabal of the Poisoned Tongue, renowned for their acts of duplicity even within the fold of the Drukhari. These quick-witted orators manipulate their allies to endure the brunt of fighting during cooperative campaigns, framing rivals of plots and sowing misinformation wherever they roam. These fork-tongued Drukhari, typically of true-born standing, serve their so-called she-devil who once courted Azdrabale Vect, Lady Malice. All whispersmiths who eavesdrop on the conversations of Lady Malice, claiming her to speak with two distinct voices. All who claim such hearsay meet untimely demises, commit by unknown assailants. The Severed, roaming the stars as a spacebound cabal, exiled from Komorra centuries ago. This plague upon the system of the Goroid Strip, under the command of Archon Saronai Ariensis, fled following a failed attempt on Vekt's life. Losing his left hand, to which his cabal now bears their namesake, Archon Ariensis refuses to regenerate the stump of his arm, and thus inadvertently caused his own men to ritually sever their own as an act of solidarity. Replacing their severed hands with talons and claws, all the better to slay the foes of Ariensis, it is a testament to the Archon's leadership that he inspires such fervor within his soldiers, despite his failure to slay the Supreme Overlord. The Cabal of the Slashed Eye, serving at the pleasure of Archon Cyphrax. These warriors seek to settle a grudge with the crime lord of Locomorra, Lord Hellion Sapphonix. Once a noble of the Cabal, who threatened their survival by bringing a Farseer into the domains of the Dark City, the Slashed Eye dispatched mercenaries and bounty hunters aplenty to Locomorra in hopes of one day purging their shameful exile. The Wraithkind, the last of the notable commands to discuss, their failed attempt to secede from the rule of Azdrabel Vekt cost them dearly. Former Archon of the Satellite Realm of Aurelifian, Lord Cliensic Drak, sealing a dark pact with demons to overthrow the Supreme Overlord. His intention to destroy a hyperspatial bridge connecting the Cyclops Gate of his realm to the Dark City would allow him to separate his domains from that of Komorra. 6 webway portals opening within the domains of Aurelifian, the night after the Ortok's grand proclamations. Eldritch entities corrupted the Pleasure City into a living hell, transforming the Cabal into night-clad monsters, alike to the mysterious mandrakes. For no matter the power base of any Cabal, their opposition to Azdrabel Vekt always entails obscene misfortunes. The results of countless failed coups, reminding all of the cost of betraying the living muse.
They are a scourge upon our galaxy, the most vile and sadistic of all our Xenos foes, and a peril to any who would ply the void in search of profit or gain. Whatever happens, should the shadow of their ships darken your path, pray you die before fighting at the helm of your vessel, lest fortune favors you and they take you alive.
This has been a tale of the Eldari Empire, read by the Antiquarian. The Eldarith Ineas see themselves as the true descendants of the nascent Eldari Empire, their stubborn defiance to fall victim to the avatar of their own hubris, gambling what vestiges of virtue remain within their cold, calloused hearts. It is often solace for bitter souls to cling to righteousness as an act of vindication, the flames of consequence lapping at their heels as they ignore the inferno to which their staunch defiance shall fuel. To acknowledge one's own failings is never easy, yet without taking responsibility of the pain we inflict, whether intentional or not, shall only poison those around us. For should you have inflicted moral wounds on others, whether grievous or slight, attempt to balm them as best you can. For left untended, such mental lacerations shall fester, and only invite further misery to its recipient, denying all hope of forgiveness.